The True Bishvat and the Kumlan of Black Gemara, we're actually up to the Mishnah and Chav Beis. So the Mishnah is the following. What happens if Nisarev Koimtza becomes Chavata? What happens if you have two commitzas? You have the commitzah of one mincha that somehow or another got mixed up with the commitzah of another mincha. Or the minchas koinim. What we know about the mincha of koinim is, we learned before already a number of times, that the entire, not just, there's no kmitza there, because the entire mincha gets burnt on the mizbech. So the kaimitz of one mincha, which is meant to get burned on the mizbech, got mixed up with an entire mincha of koinim that has to get burned on the mizbech. Or the minchas koinim mashiach, or the mincha of the kohen gadol, that the chavis he brings in the morning and the afternoon, which entirely gets burnt on the mizbeach, and you got mixed up with the mincha of an ordinary, the kmitz of an ordinary mincha, or mincha of a or the minchas nesachim, or the mincha that comes with the wine and the oil that comes with the carbon, and again, that gets entirely burnt. All of these cases, sheda, they are kosher. They're kosher. However, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Why are they kosher? Because both of them had to get burnt on the mizbeach. So what's the difference? They got mixed up together. Each one you fulfilled whatever their obligation was. But what Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, an interesting thing, he says there's a problem there. The minches koyin Mashiach, if let's say if the kaimitz got mixed up with the mincha of a koyin Mashiach or with the mincha of the sachim, the din is that it's possible. It's possible. Why is it possible? Because the kaimitz of an ordinary mincha of a yid donating is you put in only one leg of oil in that mixture, so it's pretty dry. In fact, we learned before compared to other things, it's called dry, because even though there's a leg there, it's very little when you mix it with a lot of flour. In fact, we learned before that parts of the flour doesn't have any oil at all. Mashenkein, the mincha of a kohen mashiach and the mincha of a nesachim has a lot of liquid in it. It have three legin. So comparatively speaking, one is considered dry, chareva, and one is considered lach. The minchas nesachim is considered lach. The minchas kohen mashiach is considered lach because they have three legin of oil. So therefore, they're very different entities. So he says here, if they got mixed up with the minchas and the dova, which only has one leg, which relatively speaking is considered a lach, then psula is possible. Why is it possible? Shezu bli lasan other. The zu bli lasan raka. This has a thick mixture, and this has a thin mixture, very liquidy. And the problem is then the heim boilos zumazu, they absorb from each other. What do you mean they absorb from each other? So there's a twofold problem here. The minchas the dover was meant to only have one lug of oil, now is going to absorb some of the oil from the minchas nesachim. Suddenly it has more than it's an excess of one lug. On the other hand, the minchas nesachim, which is meant to have three legin of oil, just lost some of its oil across. So therefore, he said it's a problem. So even though, as Taisus points out, it says over here, psula, lashon yachid, they're actually both possible. Both of these menachos are possible. And why he uses lashon yachid? Because the entire Mishnah is with lashon yachid, so it says in lashon yachid. So we say ksheda, everything is kosher. We say psula, everything is possible. Okay, says the Gemara. Tanan Hossam, we learned over there, we had the same civil sugi in Zvachim. Dam shenis ared b'mayim, if you have blood that got mixed up with water. If you have blood mixed up with water. So im yesh boy maris dam. So if it still appears like water, and Taisus says it doesn't mean faint, it has to be strong red, then kosher. If it still looks like dam, like blood, it's kosher. So this is a similar Gemara we had in Zvachim, but why that if the blood got mixed up with water, we're talking about blood of kosher, that you have to spray on the mizbeach and got mixed up with water. So as long as it still looks like dam, it's kosher. What about this added biyayin, red wine? So you can't really tell if so then we have to imagine that quantity of wine was water, and if the blood would have mixed in with that quantity of water, would it still have retained its color red? Then it's kosher. If not. Nisare, what happened? It got mixed up with dam behema, or dam chaya. What happens? It got mixed up of a behema, blood of a behema, which is not a carbon, or the blood of a chaya, which chaya can never be a carbon. So again, and now it's all blood. You can't tell. It's the same rule we did by wine. Is royin oise keilu mayim. Same rule we did by wine. That is, well, we imagine that this blood of the behemoth chulin is water, and if the blood of the kachim would still have retained its color, then it's all right. Now, why even bring up this case? It's exactly the same principle. The principle of wine is to tell you the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to blood. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein dam mevatel dam." We have the concept Yehuda holds in min b'minoi, that if it's the same species, they not only don't cancel each other out, they actually support each other. It's min b'minoi, and therefore he says if it's a case of blood and blood of kachim and blood of chulin, that's min b'minoi, and therefore they're not bottle at all. So even if there was a preponderance of blood of chulin and there's only a tiny, minute amount of blood of kachim, it's valid because they don't cancel each other out. Rabbi Yechon says, where did they learn it out from? Tesh already asked, we have a rule, we learned this before already, that, Rishon kama bottle, that if you're pouring the Gemara elsewhere, it makes a difference if the water goes in first or the blood goes in first or l'chayda. When the blood of the kachim goes in, for example, we say, the kama bottle, so it shouldn't be good at all. It shouldn't matter. It should differentiate which came in first and which came, which was the base and which came in. But so case is, as we'll see, we're going to talk about the next case here. I'm jumping ahead. We're going to talk about the case on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, you take the blood of the par and the blood of the soya, the blood of the bull, the blood of the goat. You put them together. Remember, and we sprinkle them on the pareiches, and we had a machlekes actually whether you put them together when you sprinkle. Remember, we had the different numbers if it's 47 or 48 or 43, depending if you hold like the mandama, you mix the dam, the par dam, soya, or you don't mix the two together. But if you mix them together, so l'chayda, the dam hapar is much more volume than the dam hasoyer. Obviously, there's a lot more blood coming out. So how can it be? How can you tell me that if you mix them together, you still have in there a dam hasoyer? Dam hasoyer is bottle. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is going to learn from here that min b'minoi is not bottle because they're both blood. They don't cancel each other out. So Taisus asks, why don't we say that if the dam hasoyer was there first and the dam hapar kama bottle, whatever comes in first is bottle, it should be the other way around. The problem. So Taisus says, and this is the rule generally, that when do we say kama bottle if it's just a normal flow? But if you pour in one go a big amount, big quantity, then we don't say kama bottle. And that's what we're talking about here. It comes straight out of the pot into this cup. Now, what does Chacham do with this? Says the Gemara. Everyone knows there's a lot more blood coming out of the par than coming out of the soy. So how can it work? Is Rabbanon hold? Rabbanon say it has nothing to do with min b'minoi, even min b'she'eina min. It makes no difference. No us. Mekan from here we learn out lo oilin that kabbonis or things that go on top of the mizbeach she'ein mevatlin zumazu zuazeh. They don't mevatl each other. Since the blood of the par and the blood of the soyer are going on the mizbeach, they don't cancel each other out. And Rabbi Yehuda holds, so that's what they learn from here. They learn from here the concept of Eilim Vav. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Mikan lemin b'mina shein a bottle." Rabbi Yehuda holds, this is the basis for min b'mina is not bottle. Rabbanan said, "Mikan le'olim shein vav." I'm going to ask a question. How do you know that's? You decide that's your limit. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda is right. But limit should the min b'mina who? Maybe the reason why dama power it doesn't cancel dama sorry because the min b'mina. Says the Gemara. So the Gemara says what? If the Tater wants to make a chiddush of min b'minay, then why give us dafka? Why give us an example of kabbanis on the mizbech, where I can misinterpret and say that the reason is not because of min b'minay, but because of oilin are not mevatel each other. If the Torah is out to teach you the din of min b'minay, the fact that the Torah gives us an example dafka by kabbanis means has nothing to do with min b'minay. Makes no difference min b'minay, min b'eina minay. They don't cancel each other out. The Torah would just give us an example of min nothing to do with kabbanis. You're right. But now that the Torah uses an example of kabbanis, is mishum the oilin. Nothing to do with min It has to do with the fact that they both go on the mizbeach. Maybe the Torah wants you to have both criteria. Add the ika min b'minay and oilin. Maybe the reason why I try to put it here is because it's oilin, but also there's another factor here, and that is it's min b'minay. Maybe if you have both characteristics, only then do we say they don't cancel each other out. Kasha, taka kasha. Rabbi Yehuda wants to learn from here. Lemim b'mina shein a bottle. So the more asks the same question to him, all the way around. How do you know? Maybe because they're on the mizbech. So you want to know. So Rabbi Yehuda answers back. If if the Torah what the main chiddush here is because kabbanis and oilen, then I cancel it out. Then why use an example of min b'minay? Tell us min b'eina minay. A bigger chiddush. Iash min oilen min b'she'eina minay kidamrit. If the Torah would give us examples of min b'she'eina minay, which normally is mevatlit, and here you tell me it's not mevatlit, okay, then you'll have a perfect. It'll say the only possible conclusion is because of oilen. So that's min b'minay where you have min b'minay, which is a much smaller chiddush because there's a logic that they shouldn't cancel each other out because they're the same. It must be Mishnah It has nothing to do with oilin. Petty Mara, the same question. V'dilma adi ika min b'mina v'oilin kasha. Taka kasha. So now that we have a kasha both sides, nobody has an advantage. Okay. Petty Mara weiter. Tanan, we learned. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ben minches kayin Mashiach." Look in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Minches kayin Mashiach or minches nesachim." Right, the minche of a kayin Mashiach and minches nesachim. If a minches the davar got mixed up, one of them is considered dry and one of them is considered wet because this has only one leg of oil. And this has 3 legs of oil. Psulin, why? Shezubli lost zubli lost raka. The hein boilers zumazu. They absorb from each other, and the problem is here's missing oil is the extra oil. But l'chayda v'chi boilers zumazu mahava. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he says that min b'minai support each other, and therefore the oil, moves around. Mahava min b'minihu, zach min b'minihu.
Also other meanings.
Oh, here Rava comes along and says, we learned before as well. Amar Rava, and we had Smicha. You learned all this. Ksav Rabbi Yehuda holds. Here you have min, and you have it in mincha. You have 2 variables. You have flour, and you have oil. So as far as the oil is concerned, it's taka min b'minay. And you ask, they don't cancel it around. Yes, but there's also flour. Flour is eina minay. So if you imagine that the oil that's included in the flour in one of the mincha, let's say, is not there, then you'll have a lot more flour than there's the oil that's in the other one, and that flour will cancel out the oil of the other one. So if you imagine that the mina is not there, then min b'she'eini mina, it falls back to the normal rules that it cancels out. Remember, the Yehuda does not hold that oilin eina mevatl zazeh. According to Chachamim, that oilin mevatl zazeh, but are not mevatl each other. Right, so it's all kosher. They don't agree. They say it's all kosher. It's Rabbi Yehuda who says, I don't believe in this concept of oilin mevatl zazeh. It's only because of min b'minay. But here it's not min b'minay. Now, why is it min b'minay? Because imagine, because there's another variable here. Imagine the minay is not here, and all you have is a minay. And there's something else here. Flour. Salek is minay. Remove the minay, the oil, in the double, let's say, as if it's not there. So all you have now is flour, and the flour that's in the kaimitz is greater than the volume of oil that's in the other one.
Does min have to be liquid?
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's liquid or not. The point is that what happened was it absorbed some of the oil that came in from the other mincha, but the flour cancels that oil out. So in other words, it doesn't matter liquid or solid. The point is that we imagine the oil inside the mincha dove is not there. Then what happened was you got new oil coming in from the other one. So this mincha cancels out that oil as if it's not there anymore. So now you're having missing oil over here, and therefore he said that's why the other one is possible as well. And each one you say that regarding the other one as if it's not there, and therefore it's possible. Itmar,
you have so much oil that it makes the flour into a liquidy substance.
That's what we're saying. Yeah, it's 3 legs of oil versus 1 leg of oil. In those 2 cases, minchas nesachim, you have a lot of oil, and the minchas kaim mashich have a lot of oil.
I'm saying if you have more oil than the flour, then the flour becomes.
You never have more oil in the flour. They have the amount of flour that you saw on 3 legging doesn't turn into watery. You just compared to this amount here, flour is a lot of oil. It's still pretty dry, relative. We learned the kaimitz of minchas chayte. The kaimitz of a minchas chayte. We learned before that the mincha of a sinner, we don't want any oil, we don't want any frankincense to shame the person. No, you did an aveda, we don't want anything nice. So we learned kaimitz the minchas chayte sheshamle. Let's say after you made the kmitza, you put oil on it. Now remember, minchas chayte shouldn't have any oil. Rabbi Yechon says, possible. It's a problem. We shouldn't have any oil even in the kmitza part. And the Shlaka says, interesting. He says, when do we say you don't have oil in the mincha? That's before you did the kmitza, like all other minchas has oil. This one doesn't. But he says here, after you did the kmitza, Even you're supposed to put a little bit of oil there. Who you're supposed to put a little bit of oil? Which oil? The residue of oil that's left from somebody else's mincha. Who atzmei meshachtrei b'shiyari halug u'ma'aleyu. In fact, you're supposed to take the kmitza and use a little bit of oil. But how can you even say that? It says, "La yosim ala shemen, la yitu la lavayin." You don't want any oil in mitzvah. Ahu shelo yikvul shemen kichav. I don't want you to treat that carbon like all other menachos where you put the oil in before you do mitzvah. No, as the mitzvah, find the residue of oil of someone else's oil because there's no oil in this carbon. Remember, he says there's no oil. Someone else, another mincha, use that residue. Takes already asks, how can there be leftover oil? It says you have to use every drop of oil for the mincha. So Tais says over here, it's impossible. There shouldn't be something left on the side of the thing, and therefore use that. Take the kmitza and scrape it against the, rub it against the wall. So you have a little bit of oil there as well, a little bit. And the fact that you don't have it first, that's already enough embarrassing and shame and everything else. The question, it says, the bowl. So this question that finishes the bowl. If you have dry, that got mixed up with oil, yakri, we should be makrit. Why? Because the Rabbanon say, even though it got mixed up, oil, I don't give it min b'she'ein mina, let's say, this is dry and this is moist, but Rabbanon hold, ain't oil in mevatna zezeh, everything goes up. The Buddha says, lo yakir, the Buddha says, you should be makrit. You shouldn't be makrit. It sounds like over here, why did Rabbanan say Yamakir? Because oilin are not mavatal each other. But but if it seems to me, but everyone agrees if you had just one, not the mavatal each other, you have just one, let's say the kimitza of a minchas chayte, and you have oil on it, it's possible. My lab, what are we talking about? What do you mean dry? Which mincha is dry? Kaimet, the minchas chayte. The chayte we're talking about dry is the kaimitz of a minchas chayte. It's totally dry. The added the kaimitz the minchas davar mixed up in the minchas davar, so it has oil on it. But from where did it come from? From minchas davar. So Chacham say oil and aim about bring it up. Had it not been for that reason, Chacham would agree. A minchas chayte on its own with oil, possible. Kashan shlokish. Who told you that chareva means minchas chayte? You decide minchas chayte, and therefore it's a problem if it would be on its own. No, we're talking about relative ones here. What do you mean relative ones here? We're talking about minchas parim ve'elim, and which got mixed up with minchas kvasim. By the keves you have 3 loyin of oil, and by the elim you have, by the parim you have 2. By the so Rashi put out over here the whole thing there. So by the keves you have 3 loyin pretty sudden. By the party you have 2 in Puri Saran, and by the eye you have 1. So therefore, compared to the kevis, they are much less. They are considered dry. Dry doesn't mean literally dry. It means in comparison. We're not talking about minchas chayte at all. We're not going to minchas chayte. What are you bringing here? And we're just talking about they got mixed up. So Chacham hold ein oil and the Abiyud again argues there's too much oil here. It moves into here, so it'll be too little, and this one here will have too much. Talking about Hedik Tana, in that it says it clear. One example is Michas Parim ve'elim Michas Kvasim, and the Chod is just out of a bowl. It says both cases. How can you tell me that Chod is out of a bowl? It means Michas Parim and Kvasim. You could have. Rabbi Yehuda says, when answers Pirushi Kamefashla, we're explaining what's the reason why Minchas Parim ve'elim got mixed up with Minchas Kvasim. You shouldn't bring it because this is Charev and this is bowl. That's Pshat here. Okay, and then the next one's a new sugya. Continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem.